bit of a slideshow here, but like I'd say, I want to go back 250 years, but first I want to take you back a little bit more recently, back to 2003. And that was a time in my life when I was a little bit more carefree and irresponsible. And so I could go for summer long kayaking trips. So one in 2003, it started in Port Hardy, and I went down around the outside of Vancouver Island. I didn't follow this route exactly as illustrated, but I did end up at Nanaimo. So I did cover this area, but the idea was to explore each of the five sounds on the outside of Vancouver Island. So just to orient yourselves, there's Quatsino to the north end, then Kayak below Brooks Peninsula, Nootka Sound sort of in the middle here, then Clayoquot Sound, and finally Barkley Sound. So our focus tonight is on Nootka Sound. And just to give you a bit of the look at the lie of the land, this is the interior of central Nootka Sound, dominated by Bly Island. It's problematic on a number of fronts, and it's actually not my favorite kayaking destination by any stretch. It has some limitations, one being, for instance, there's only one public launch site in the sound proper at Cougar Creek, right around this area. I hope you can all see my little mouse there, pointing out Cougar Creek. It's got lots of nooks and crannies to explore, but you'll find that most of them are filled up with fishing lodges. And I remember one particular kayaking trip that I did out of Cougar Creek. I went around Nootka Island and came back up through Tuplana Inlet. And I think there was about 30 fishing boats in view at any particular point in time, like little mosquitoes darting around. For the recreational area, you've got the Spanish Pilot Group in Bly Island Provincial Park, and it is not an exceptional archipelago for outer Vancouver Island. There's far better areas to explore, better beaches, better campsites, and so on, more scenery and such. But there are places that I love, and not surprisingly, they're all on the outside coast. So I'm going to touch on 8 locations just briefly, walk you through them. Cattle Island to the north, then New Chatlet's Provincial Park, Third Beach, Calvin Falls, Bajo Point, Calicum Creek, Uquat, and finally Escalante Point. Starting with Cattle Island, I stole actually this image from BC Marine Trails because I wanted to show the top-down view because it's an exceptional beach. When I first kayaked around the island back in 2003, I was drawn here. This was by far the most exceptional camping opportunity here. And you can see it's just a beautiful gravel beach. Actually, I'd call it pebbles to be more precise. Quite steep, but flat on the top. And there's only one other beach that I can think of that approximates this, and it's Jepther Point out on the northeast end of Vancouver Island, north of Port Hardy. This sort of well-washed pebbles on a very steep incline. And you have to watch it when you're pulling your kayak up that you don't leave it because it might just launch itself back into the ocean here. But I do want to give a little perspective on how this beach might have come about the way that it did in its unique way, and also to talk about the adjacent waterway, Rolling Roadstead. I think I have some idea of how that got its name. Because I came back here in 2009. I was coming down with a friend doing a trip from Port Hardy down to Tofino, and our plan was to stop here for the night. Some of you might remember the west coast of Vancouver Island in 2009, and there had been a hurricane off of Hawaii. And so we were getting the residual swell from that unseasonably high swell. And this was our first day experiencing that. So we came into Rolling Roadstead, and it was rolling. We basically surfed our way in and surfed into the campsite here. And rather than this nice calm water that you can picture here, it was a very different scene. What was happening was the waves were rolling up right up to the top, to the crest of the hill here, washing up the pebbles. You could hear the pebbles washing up. And then as the wave receded, you could hear the pebbles being dragged back down again. And the whole thing ended up in a spinning of white water that I'd characterize as basically the spin cycle of a washing machine. It was just very intimidating. And then the next wave would come off and wash back up again. And it was basically pretty clear that our intended campsite, we were not going to be able to camp here that night. Instead, we pushed on over to New Chatlet's. And so in contrast to the Spanish Pilot Group, I would rate this one of the top kayaking destinations. Beautiful islands, beautiful beaches, beautiful camping sites, and beautiful places to explore. I won't go into great amount of detail about that, other than the fact that there's a lot of interesting side trips that you can take, which brings me to Third Beach. This is actually on the outside of Nootka Island, and it's not an exceptionally great kayaking beach. You can see there's quite a bit of surf here that you have to contend with, and it's in a bit of an exposed area. But I'll give you a little bit of a look at the lie of land. It's actually the northern, it's located here, and it's the northern campsite on the Nootka Trail. And if you're not familiar with the Nootka Trail, it runs down the coast to the outside of Nootka Island to come out at Yuquat. And there's two ways you can get in. You can come in by float plane to the lagoon at the north end here at Louis Bay, and then take the U-Tuck out from Yuquat, or you can take a water taxi from Tassus and come in. I'll just give it a little bit of a closer look so you can see the lie of the land a bit better. Here's New Chatela's Provincial Park, and here's Louis Bay down here. You can see more detail here. If you were to come in by water taxi, you'd be dropped off probably at this little rock islet here, and then you'd have to clamber your way along muck around the outside of the bay, and then find your way to the trail and make your way overland. And this is probably one of the most difficult sections of the entire trail, if not the most difficult, to come out at Third Beach. Whereas if you come in by float plane, you'd land in the lagoon and just walk along this little stretch here to come out to Third Beach. And I'm suggesting that it would be an interesting day trip if somebody was motivated to make the crossing. You could come into the lagoon. If you had to do a little bit of a portage to come into the lagoon here, wouldn't be too arduous, I don't think. And then you can come out onto that beautiful beach. Just another look at that. It's one of those exceptional beaches. It's just a beautiful place. So you could camp here overnight, just have a picnic there, what have you. Next on my list is Calvin Falls. It's sort of in the middle outer section of Nootka Island. It's one of those rare waterfalls that basically go directly into the beach. There's not many on Vancouver Island. There's Suziat Falls on the West Coast Trail, and there's that one, I think it's Bear Point on the Juan de Fuca Marine Trail right at the southern end, that kind of qualifies for that. But this is an exceptional spot. You can see that there's a rope, maybe you can't see, but there's a rope that goes up the side here so you can get up to the potholes at the top and soak in the potholes and just explore up the river, or just have a bath in the water here. If you do come in by kayak, and you can do it, it's very achievable to do. There's a rock ledge on the north side. You can come in and just come in, sort of tuck in the north side. And there's also two ways on the south end. You can come in the north end of the rocks here, or come in through the middle. I've come in through both ways, and they both worked out. And so it's very easy to land compared to other areas on the outer coast, just because of those little rock ledges that you can find. And it's also actually good to camp to the north and south, because all the hikers camp right at the falls. So you get a bit more privacy that way, and you can still enjoy the falls. Two other areas that if you're in the Spanish pilot group, maybe having a holiday there and you want to extend it a little bit, you could go as far as Bajo Points and land on basically a surf-free beach, because it's protected by Bajo rocks, Bajo Reef, Bajo Rocks, Bajo Reef. And you'll just have a little plip of waves on the beach at that point. If the weather is from the northwest, if it's coming from the south, you might have a bit more of a problem, but it's a good day trip. The only thing I wouldn't recommend is trying to hike up to Calvin Falls from Bajo Point, because this stretch of the trail on the beach is just small boulders or large rocks, depending on how you look at it. So you'd be rock hopping the entire way. It's actually quite a good workout. But a beautiful camping opportunity is in Calcum Creek here, Calcum Creek, yeah, it is. You can come in through rocks, so it's nicely protected, and there's a good run of fresh water here as well, an expansive beach. And I haven't seen too many hikers ever camping there, which is great. Number 7 on my list is Yuquat. This is a view south along the beach. You can see it's a bit gnarly along the south end of Nook Island here. Lots of rocks and lots of crazy kind of chop and such from the headlands there, and good surf here. But it's beautiful, just a beautiful area. And this stretch of the trail, it's just it's phenomenal. You get up into the high areas, the overland portions around McQuinna Point, which we're looking at here. But most of it is just beach hike, and absolutely spectacular. If you do stop in at Yuquat, there's not much there. There's the lengthy dock, there's the lighthouse, there's a couple houses. I'm not sure what stage they're at for being lived in or not. And then you've got this historic church. This was actually built by Augustus Brabant, the Jesuit padre, back in the 1880s when he lived here. It burned down, I believe, in the 1950s and was rebuilt. If you go inside, there's some beautiful carvings. It might be closed off right now because they got the Whaler Shrine back from the American Museum of Anthropology. They had stored it in their basement since 1913 and never shown it. It had been commandeered from UQuat and sent down to the States. Um, so it's actually inside there at the last I heard, just being stored for the moment until they figure out what to do with it and where to show it. It's going to be spectacular when they do show it. But the thing that really struck me when I was there in 2003 was this stained glass window. And you can see from the inscription here, it was donated by the government of Spain. And it's the Nootka Convention Conference between Captains Bodega Equadra and Vancouver in 1792. And I thought, well, this is interesting. I have to find out more about this. And so I endeavored to do that. But of course, it was 2003, which was a totally different world at the time, because if you wanted to find something out, you'd have to go down to the local library, use a Dewey Decimal System, find a book, and hope that it had the information that you wanted inside it. And invariably, the information I found only raised more questions. And I wrote a few of them out. I won't spend much time on this, but you can read it if you want to. But I thought the most curious thing about this was, why would they send two emissaries halfway around the world to sign a document when they're both in Europe? What is the rationale for Spain and England reaching an agreement in Nootka Sound? It was the most curious thing. And every time I found out a little bit more information, it just didn't add any more to the equation of what was really behind all what happened in Nootka Sound back between they first arrived in 1774 to what ended up happening in 1792. So I started to read the journals just as a hobby. And of course, Cook's journal was one of the key ones to go to, of course. But there's actually 5 journals that were written by people who were on that voyage. Ellis, Rickman, Ledyard, and Anderson all wrote journals. And so there's various interpretations of what happened. And it fills in quite a bit more of the information. And the reason that I know that there's 5 journals is because there was something quite profound happening in terms of the information available on the internet. And I'm just going to give you one example here. And it's this little sticker here, Howie Reid. Howie Reid was a law society, not law society, law firm in Vancouver. And Howie was sort of an armchair historian, and he collected a huge amount, about 25,000 rare books, journals, documents, historic records in his private collection, and then donated them to the University of British Columbia. And there was another family that did the same thing, the Chung family. And so they amassed a huge number of records, rare books, and manuscripts and such. And UBC has digitized them all and made them available online. And it is such an incredible resource. It's just amazing what's available now. And thanks to these people, because you have to appreciate that previously these were private holdings. So if these were one of a kind, you could not read them, even if you were a historian who had a vested interest in this, unless you knew about this collection and knew where to go. You couldn't seek out this kind of information. And now there's resources like this all over the world. So it's fundamentally changed what's available for information. What I found was there was quite a small number of people who were key to all the events that took place on the west coast of Vancouver Island back in that period. We know that Vancouver and Bodega met in 1792 in UQuat to sign the Nootka Conference Convention, or however it was phrased on the stained glass window. And we had Cook visit there in 1778. He was the first one to make landfall. Perez visited from San Blas in Mexico, the first Spaniard to reach the shore there in 1774, but he didn't make landfall. In fact, he didn't do much of anything on that trip, unfortunately. What you might not know is that Vancouver was the midshipman on Cook's third voyage, so he was actually there twice. Bodega wasn't involved in the Perez expedition, but Martinez was the second in command on that expedition. And he went on to be the first commandant at Fort San Miguel, the Spanish fort that was created at Nootka at Yuquat. Bodega came onto the scene in 1775 and was on the second expedition that went up the coast. He was the captain of the Sonora. Perez and Martinez were on that voyage as well. They were on the Santiago as officers. Those two ships separated. Bodega went on to make landfall at Sea Lion Cove on Crusoe Island, Alaska, and claimed that for the Spanish. And that led to the Spanish claim for basically all of North America. It was just the way that they worked it at the time, that if you landed at some point at one end of a continent and you had landed at the other end of the continent, you owned everything in between. That was just the Spanish way at the time. So that allowed Spain to claim from Alaska all the way down the west coast of North and South America, essentially. So that was quite a profound trip that he was able to make. He, of course, became the third commandant at Fort San Miguel. Martinez was actually the one who seized all the ships, though, the English ships. The captain of one of those ships, the Argonaut, was James Colnett. He was one of the merchant vessel captains there for the fur trade. Well, he was also midshipman on Cook's second voyage of discovery, in which Vancouver was an able-bodied seaman. So they were actually together on the same voyage. If you go down one extra step, there's other people who were involved here too, that were central to the fur trade and such. So we had George Dixon and Nathaniel Portlock, who were on the third Cook expedition. Dixon was the armorer, Portlock was the master's mate. They went on to become the captains of the first vessels that received a license from the East India Company to go to the northwest coast of North America in the King George and Queen Charlotte. They were part of the same group that was financing the Colnett expedition, which also involved John Meares. He was a financier, but also a captain. He was actually found by George Dixon, mired in ice in Prince William Sound. And he had lost 20 of his 30 crew members over the winter there from scurvy. Meares was the one who went to England and spoke to Prime Minister William Pitt and the British cabinet and rattled the saber about the ships being seized. And that was what instigated the whole Nootka controversy that erupted, that led to Vancouver and Bodega being sent there. I'll just round out the key figures with Archibald Menzies and James Johnstone. Menzies was a naturalist on Vancouver's expedition to Nootka. He was also the naturalist on Colnett's ship on his first trip to Nootka. And in addition to that, he was in the Royal Navy. So he was a surgeon aboard ships in the West Indies when Vancouver was in the West Indies as well. So there's all this continuity and back and forth between all these figures. There's more to it than that, but that's sort of the key ones in a nutshell. But at this point, I want to ask a skill testing question. I think this could be fun. Be the first one to type in the correct answer to the question I'm going to ask you. And I'm going to send you all 3 copies of The Wolves of Nootka. So when you're ready, I'll turn on my chat. But if we go back to this little display of all these names, there is one name that is missing from this that is that connects everybody. One key name that's missing from this. Who is it? Nobody? Is that?
There are people answering.
There are? Oh, I don't see anything new.
Yeah, there are.
Okay. Oh, I see. Oh, I wasn't doing it properly. No, blind. Yeah. No. McQuina. Who said McQuina? Fred. You're the winner, my friend. Oh, wait. Let's see. Did I get that in order? I'm trying to think here.
Yeah, I just misspelled it. I didn't put the Q in there.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Nick Heath too.
Nick got it as well. Okay, well, I'll have to send both you guys books then. I know who you guys are, so I will make arrangements to get in touch with you and get you both books. That's great. Yeah. So actually, yeah. So we do have this historic image. I believe this was from the Malaspina journal, but it could have been from somebody else. But this shows McQuina with his friend Calicum. And this is the only image that I know like this of the two of them together. But it shows, of course, the whaler's hat that they wore, ships in the background. It's kind of an interesting historic image. Which brings us to Escalante Point, my 8th destination that I wanted to take you to. It's on Hesquia Peninsula, a bit south of Nootka, but sort of near the entrance. And it's a beautiful camping beach. And I believe this photo was taken in 2009 when there was quite a bit of the swell coming in from Hawaii, but it seems to be nicely calm here. My friend had to fix his skeg while we stopped here. But I believe if you were here in August 1774, you would have seen the Santiago at anchor. That's not where the prevailing theory is of where he anchored, but I have reason to believe that he would have been right here. I'm just going to walk through that because there's a bit of evidence that we've got. So I'm going to work it backwards here from the Juan Perez journal. Now, this is the English translation. I tried to find the original Spanish, but was unable to, and I don't know quite why I wasn't able to. But I'm just going to read this particular point when this is written from the day that he arrived, August 8th. So from the said hour, we were sounding frequently, and the first depth was 25 brasses. From this depth, we came to 15, 16, 19 brasses, and from this to 25 brasses, very dark sand and green slime, where we anchored, giving it the name Surgidero de San Lorenzo. This maneuver was done at 7 in the evening, at which time a bearing was taken at Punta de Santa Clara to the northwest, which would be Bajo Point now, a distance of 4 leagues, 12 miles, and that of San Esteban to the southeast, a distance of 2 leagues, and the middle or inside angle to the east, a distance of 1 league, 3 miles. So that's 3 distances for points of reference and depth. So that's pretty clear evidence on where he would have anchored. Additionally, there is a second journal for that voyage, Tomas de la Peña, and he was rather more colorful in his writing. So he wrote, but the high wind and the seas carried out, this is the next day. So this is what happened because they were only there overnight and they had to leave the next morning. And so he wrote, but the high wind and the seas carried us steadily towards the shore, so that it was necessary to cut the cable and lose the anchor. The cable being cut, sail was made with the ship's head to the southwest, a quarter south, and with great difficulty we managed to weather a rocky point that stretched out about 1 league into the sea. We'll get back to that. The captain named the anchorage the roadstead of San Lorenzo, some hill to which were to the northwest, westward of the roadstead he called Hills of Santa Clara, and to the point to the southeast he named San Esteban. According to what the captain told us, the roadstead is at 4930. More clues. I was worried about the language here, though, when I read this. We managed to weather a rocky point that stretched out about 1 league into the sea. I don't believe that there isn't a headland that extends 1 league into the sea, but there are rocks. So I went back to the Spanish and says, Pudimos reservar una punta de piedras que sale de la tierra como una legua. Translates as we succeeded in passing a stony point which projects from the land nearly 1 league. What I think that means is that there's a rock that is projecting from the water, located 1 league from land. And that makes far more sense because there are rocks that extend 1 league out, but there is no headland that extends 1 league out. So I think that has to be reconsidered in the equation there. And then we get to my friend, Joseph Mazzino. He was the naturalist who accompanied Martinez to Uquat when they went to establish the Spanish fort there in 1788. And he stayed on when Eliza became the commandant and as well when Bodega became the commandant. So he was there till 1792 and he became fluent in the language. And so he was able to ask the locals at the time what it was like to have seen the ship come. And so he got the answer, and this was it. The sight of this vessel filled the natives at first with terror, and at the present time they testified to having been seized with fright from the moment they saw to the westward the corpulent machine slowly approaching their coast. They believed that Coats was coming to make a second visit, Coats being the creator, their spiritual being, the creator, and to punish the people for their sins. As many as were able hid in the mountains, others shut themselves up in their cabins, and some of the braves took their canoes to reconnoiter near the hill that overlooks the ocean. We'll get back to that one in a sec. They approached the vessel, timorously lacking courage to go aboard for some time until attracted by the friendly signs of the Spanish crew. They mounted the ship and looked with astonishment at so many new and extraordinary objects that were presented to their view. I find this really fascinating, and actually Mazzino's journal is, because he was writing about the time and able to understand the language. So he has a very different perspective, as well as being a naturalist, more a scientist than a sailor. And so there's some really good insights in that particular journal. The thing that bothered me when I first saw the English translation here, to reconnoiter near the hill that overlooks the ocean, I thought, well, this would be a huge clue. But there is no hill on Hesquiat Peninsula. It's just all flat terrain. So I went back to the original, and it was this: Los más atrevidos tomaron sus braguas para reconocer desde cerca la mole que establecía en el océano. Translates as the boldest took to their canoes in order to examine more closely the great bulk that rose above the ocean. So the translation is completely wrong. It's important to note that, because if you're trying to make judgments about the history that we have and you take it from a translation, they're not necessarily correct. So it does take a second eyeball. So the way this was interpreted by the Oregon Historical Society that published the book that translated the Perez expedition looked at it this way, and I'll just zoom into the salient part. They had Perez's boat coming up to this particular point in line with almost Split Cape. And then I guess the anchor dragged, and so they cut it, and then they avoided Perez Rocks and came out. There's a couple problems with this, because we know from the journal that they anchored in 45 meters, and here it's basically at 20 meters. It is correct to the 4 leagues and the 2 leagues, but I have a bit of a theory here, because if you're looking at this from towards the north, you're not going to be measuring from Esteban Point down here. You're going to be measuring from this point, because you won't be able to see this point. So it would be 2 leagues from here, from that point north. And then so it doglegs instead. So this is my dogleg theory. So you got to appreciate that the measurements probably weren't exact anyway. They're all approximate, because he said the anchorage is at 4930. Well, that's 4930 here. And you can see it, so it'd be right at the 20, and it's not close there. So things were approximate in that respect. So I tend to think there is good reason to say that it was closer to the north. If we take a look at what it's like at Esteban Point in Barchester Bay, the depths, well, here's your 45 meters approximately, right at this location. And this fits with being a league offshore. Here's the problem though. And the main problem that I have is that if you're dragging anchor, you are 3 miles offshore before you get near any dangerous rocks. Why would you cut the cable if you've got 3 miles? Even if you were halfway there, a mile and a half in, you still got a mile and a half to notice that, oh my gosh, we've dragged anchor. We have to pick up the anchor and go. And so it just doesn't make sense to me. You would only cut the cable if you're stuck and you can't get the anchor up, or you're in imminent danger of being driven onto rocks and you have to escape immediately. I can't see that situation being here. But if you look up to Escalante Point, it's a totally different terrain. You've got rocks well offshore to the north, and you've got a league of rocks, 3 miles of rocks offshore here. So if you anchored in 45 meters approximately here, and you dragged anchor, you're coming into rocks fairly quickly. And you're going to be very cognizant of the fact, if you know that you're on a southwest course, basically I put that, they described it as southwest, a quarter south. I put that at 215 degrees. This is basically your trajectory here. So you'd have to, if you're only capable of that trajectory on your vessel, then you're going to have to make a decision pretty fast that you have to cut and go to avoid the rocks over here and to be able to pass the rocks out here. So additionally, that passage from Mazzino shows that it was the Yuquot people who were going out to the vessel, assuming that he wasn't writing about the Hesquiat, because he certainly didn't make any other references to the Hesquiat. He was always talking to the Nootka. In addition, there's in Martinez's journal, in the 1778 journal, when he arrives at Yuquot, he meets with McQuina, and McQuina recognizes him from 1774. And so McQuina at that time would have been a 9-year-old child. And what would a 9-year-old child from Yuquot be doing in a canoe visiting a ship that was 17 kilometers from Yuquot at dawn in the morning? That doesn't make sense. And it's just I lost my train of thought. It was bound to happen sooner or later. But it just yeah, the train of thought was that if the vessel was 17 kilometers away, you would not be able to see it from Yuquot. It would not have been visible. It would have been on the edge of the horizon. It might have been a dot. So I strongly believe that they anchored up here, and there is actually a way to find out because the anchor is still there somewhere. I don't know what kind of condition it would be after 250 years, but these things have a habit of sticking around. If anybody actually went to look for it, they were probably looking at Perez rocks, and so wouldn't have much luck if in fact it is up in this area. But it would be interesting to find. Wouldn't that be a great find to find a 250-year-old anchor? I do have one other quick controversy to clear up. It's about the name Nootka. And so for that, we're going to go back to Cook's visit in 1778. Now, Cook, of course, is credited with naming Nootka, but exactly how that happened, we're not quite sure. But I'm going to start with just by reading the salient part of the Cook Journal about this. This is when they arrived at Nootka. He says, notwithstanding appearances, we're not yet sure that there were any inlets, but as far as we were in a deep bay, I resolved to anchor with a view to endeavor to get some water, which by this time we were in great want. At length, as we advanced, the existence of the inlet was no longer doubtful. At 5 o'clock, we reached the west point of it, where we would be becalmed for some time. Well, in this situation, I ordered all the boats to be hoisted out to tow the ships in. But this was hardly done before a fresh breeze sprung up again to the northwest, with which we were enabled to stretch up into the arm of the inlet that was observed by us to run into the northeast. There we were again becalmed and obliged to anchor in 85 fathoms of water and so near the shore as to reach it with a hawser. The wind failed the Discovery before she got within the arm, where she anchored and found only 75 fathoms. So we're looking at 155 meters for the Resolution and 128 meters for the Discovery within a hawser's length, which is about probably same as a cable, 600 feet, I imagine, give or take. And so those are two very strong clues about where they anchored that first night. There's also this story, and it comes up again and again in different manifestations. And this one comes from the Times Colonist in an article about the history of Vancouver Island. It reads, Cook and his fellow officers watched the resident people gesticulate and call it Nootka, Nootka Chim, which they'd interpret to be the local name of the place. In fact, the paddlers familiar with the dangers of the exposed coast had been instructing the ship to come around the point, but thereafter the name Nootka remained. Now that comes actually from our father, A.J. Brabant, who lived in Nootka in the 1880s and became fluent. And the only word that he could figure out that matched Nootka was Nootka, go around. And so that's where that stems from. It's just supposition. So let's take a look. I wanted to find a map like the Oregon Historical Society had of the Perez expedition that charted out where people think that Cook anchored that first night. I didn't find one. So what I did instead was I just asked ChatGPT to research this and tell me where he anchored the first night. And so as ChatGPT tends to do, it hallucinated and said the exact anchorage was in what Cook named Friendly Cove. Wrong. And it very specifically gave approximate coordinates down to the second. So I asked ChatGPT where exactly that was. And this is where ChatGPT figures that Cook anchored. Well, I think the prevailing opinion is right about here. There was an article that was done by two members of the Cook Society that laid out the whole thing with so many errors that I actually wrote and said, you got these things wrong. And then rather than correct it, they just took the article down. So I was never able to use that as a resource. I would have loved to have quoted that. But I think what ended up happening was they believed that this was the entrance that they almost made, but didn't quite. And then the natives came out and said, go round, go round. And Cook thought, oh, there's Mr. and Mrs. Go Around or whatever. But the problem is the depths. And so when you look at the depths at Yuquat in this area, well, it's 70, but 105, but nothing 150 meters in depth. But if you go a little bit farther around towards Birdwood Bay, and we'll just look around the corner. So the bottom corner here is Birdwood Bay. This is a continuation into Sukiarki Channel. This is Bly Island to the north here. But you can see all of a sudden the depths 140, 158. And so I would suggest that within about 600 feet, you are quite likely to get about 155 meters right around here, which is where the Resolution would have dropped anchor with a discovery right behind. And then Resolution Cove, where they actually spent the month, was up here. They towed themselves in the next day to spend a month there. And they actually missed Friendly Cove. As far as the name Nootka, I thought I had found a smoking gun. The journals don't get much more obscure than Andrew Bracy Taylor, third mate aboard the Prince of Wales, who was in Richard Colnett's ship that sailed to Nootka Sound. He wrote, Friendly Cove lies within the point form in the northwest entrance into the sound and has the advantage in every respect to our former situation, the fishing village being where they anchored up by Chiash, up in Hannah Channel on the other side of Bly Island, with the advantage of a fine beach and the daily healthy sea breeze over a low point of land. The town, which stands very pleasant, the natives call Nootka. I thought, wow, this is significant because this is the first actual statement from the time, from contemporaneous record that shows that somebody made the connection between the natives naming it that. But then our friend Mazzino, my friend I should say, he was there, of course, so he asked the question and he wrote, I do not know by what mistake it was given the name of Nootka, as the natives do not know this word, and they assure me that they never heard it until the English began to traffic on that island. I suspect that the word Nutchi, which signifies mountain, gave occasion to this error, as what Cook called Nootka is never among the islanders any other name than Uquatl. So that's just another supposition, Nutchi. So I think the bottom line is we'll never know why it was named Nootka by Cook, except we can pretty much be assured that it was not go around, go around. Just to end this off, I just wanted to share a few of the illustrations. I can't share the magic of the journals to any great extent because they're written words and they take longer to communicate. But this particular image, this was one of the Nootka villages. It could have been Yuquat, it could have been Chiash. I can't match the topography to Yuquat. So that's why I'm not thinking it's Yuquat. So it might have been Chiash. But this was drawn by John Weber, the artist on Cook's Third Voyage. So that's back in 1778. This was the interior in 1778. And so it's got the carved houseposts, the kluma, and Matsita, one of the images there, and then of course McQuina with his whaler's hat, distinctive for that. So this would have been the elder McQuina, not the same McQuina who was there. His son inherited the name and his position sometime before the merchant vessels started to arrive in the 1780s. And then just one illustration here from, this is from Miris's journal. So this was a chart drawn of Friendly Cove. And I think this is actually historically significant because I tend to believe that these longhouses here is the actual representation of where the houses were located. And I bet you dollars to donuts that the poor archaeologists who were doing digs to find out where the houses were located did not have this as a reference. It's just an obscure little thing, but I bet you this is fairly accurate because as a chart, they were using these as visual references, and I don't see any reason why they would put in these locations if they weren't relatively accurate. So just something to think of in terms of the kind of applications that some of these old resources can have. And then this representation, I just wanted to share this quick one of the Spanish village. You saw what possibly Yuquat was like before. This is what it became when the Spanish moved in. They set up a little, almost a town here. I think there were about a dozen buildings, and I could even, if I researched it, I could have told you which each of them was. This was sort of the common area, the commandante's office and common area for the officers and such. And they had a hospital there and a whole bunch of different things. It was quite an expensive little community. Of course, in order to build that, they had to tear down all the longhouses. One of the interesting things about these images too is I like the fictitious ones. They're as interesting as well. This was in Maris's journal. Or no, actually, no, this wasn't. This was independent of any journal. This is just an illustration of the arrest of James Colnett. And the flying of the Spanish flag on the Argonaut. And so this is James Colnett here. He's being arrested and his cutlass is being taken away while the evil Martinez is holding at bay with his cutlass held out. This actually never happened because the arrest actually took place on Martinez's ship in his cabin. And so this is a scene that never occurred in landscape that doesn't exist because this is supposed to be Nootka Island and Yuquat. And I guess this is the bastion that they built that was actually where the lighthouse is located now on the outer point. So no semblance to reality at all. I just thought that was interesting. I'm just going to very quickly, I guess I'm running out of time. I've not kept track. Apologies for that. But just why was Nootka chosen as the location to sign a convention? It's very complicated, but just quickly to summarize, I'm going to lay out the basics, very, very basics. But the Spanish had lost a war, so they were weakened. And so they had also lost an ally because the French were by that point involved in their very bloody revolution. So they couldn't be an ally for the Spanish if the Spanish went to war. But at the same time, they didn't want to cede the North American coast. The British was that William Pitt was up for re-election, and he needed some sort of resolution, and it needed to be tough because you know the way it works in elections in the opposition, how they would attack any kind of weakness on this or an ability to get a resolution, because it was quite a thing at the time. Seizing British ships in a time of peace was not well looked upon. But there was two things that Pitt did have to take into account. Was the idea of freedom of the seas for British vessels and the right to trade. And so those needed to be won for sure. But he got that before the emissaries were sent to Nootka. So that was already taken care of. But the bottom line was that it would have been ridiculous to go to war over Nootka because it was of no benefit to England whatsoever. This was just saber rattling. And if there was war in Europe, it would open up things like Gibraltar again. And so that could be under siege again. So there was nothing to be gained and much to be lost as a result of this. So the solution was both sides could agree, send two people halfway around the world. It would take 3 to 4 years to get this done. Their task was to hand over Nootka, a symbolic gesture from Spain to England, to make up for Maris's loss, which was a whole other story because he basically lied about the whole premise that led to the Nootka controversy. That's a whole complete rabbit hole to go down to. I won't do that. And then they were charged to jointly survey the coast to determine the extent of Spain's claim, which they never did for reasons I won't get into. Again, another rabbit hole. What they did with this was basically they put it off. Pitt got his resolution. Spain didn't cede the North American coast. It was going to take 4 years to resolve. And the big hope for everybody involved was that Nootka would be forgotten by the time that they came back to Europe. And that's pretty much what happened. So not much ended up being resolved in Nootka Sound. There was no document that was actually signed and agreed upon, as much as the stained glass window would like to show a desk and papers being signed. Again, something that never occurred in land that doesn't exist. So what I did from all this was I ended up writing 3 books. It didn't start out that way, to be sure, but it was something I ended up having to do. It just called out to be written. The first book is the early years, the Spanish exploration, the Cook exploration, and the start of all the careers of the main characters. Second book is the fur trade, and the third book is the Nootka controversy and all the events that happened in Nootka and how they were ultimately resolved. I would like to very much thank you if you've stuck through this far. I don't know how many people have left off. I have no clue. I hope I'm not talking to myself at this point in time, but if you did stick through, I do want to be able to thank you. If you're stocking up on maps or if you need any guidebooks, I'm off. I've created a discount code. So at checkout, you can just put in SKABC at wildcoast.ca. So if you need maps for any trips this year or anything like that, there'll be a 20% discount code for you. And so that's going to be in place for about, it's actually, I put it in for 72 hours. So you got, if you want to do some spring shopping for summer trips, this would be a good time to do it. And any support for the books would be absolutely appreciated. If you do happen to read them, you can read them in any order. They don't have to be read first to last. And you know, if you're not interested in the Spanish explorations, just skip those chapters and follow Vancouver, etc. Many different ways to read them, but I'd love any feedback if anybody takes the time to read them. And I really appreciated would be some stars on Goodreads or Amazon or Google Books or anything like that, where I can get some momentum going on these. Because of course, when you start something new in this day and age, if you've got no stars and no reviews, your book doesn't exist. Anyway, I'll leave it there and give the floor back and say thanks again for sticking through this.